Archaeologists in Panama kept finding chiefs covered in gold under a plain sunburned field. Weird enough, then they found chief regalia so small it could only belong to a child. That discovery shifted the interpretation of the site. El Caño was no longer just a rich ceremonial site. It looked more like a place where power could pass from one generation to the next. And now, a newly opened chamber there has expanded that picture. El Caño stands apart from the usual ancient gold story. The newest chamber, dated to around AD 800 to 1000, didn't just produce shiny artifacts. It added another piece to a much larger pattern. Archaeologists found pottery, gold ornaments, and a central high-status person marked out by where the gold was placed. This was not random wealth in the dirt. It was a public statement about rank. The objects themselves are vivid. 2 bracelets, 2 earrings, pectoral ornaments decorated with bats and crocodiles. Those are not the kind of items someone tosses in casually. They were chosen to say something. In a world with no billboards, no spotlights, and no giant stone inscriptions, gold did the talking. It told everyone exactly who mattered most in that chamber. The location makes this even more striking. Not Egypt, not Peru, not some famous archaeological landscape packed with giant ruins, central Panama. Historically, this region was often treated as the place between the main acts of the ancient Americas, wedged between the Maya to the north and the great Andean cultures to the south. El Caño repeatedly challenges that older view. That old assumption existed for a reason. This part of Panama does not hit you like a stone-built empire. There's no skyline of huge temples, no carved dynastic walls, no dramatic ruins screaming a powerful society was here. In tropical Central America, a lot of everyday life was built in materials that don't age gracefully. Wood, thatch, fibers, skin, feathers. Most of it simply doesn't stick around for 1,000 years. So when gold survives, it becomes one of the loudest voices left. And El Caño did not give up that voice quickly. Julia Mayo's team began geophysical surveys there in 2005. By 2010, they had dug a pit about 16 feet deep and uncovered a chief covered in gold. Then the site kept escalating. More ornaments appeared. More chambers turned up. More evidence started linking this field to a whole ceremonial landscape. This was not a lucky weekend dig. It was years of slow, patient work, turning a quiet pasture into one of the biggest archaeological stories in Panama. The contrast is striking from the surface. El Caño looks ordinary, the kind of place where you'd expect grass, cattle, and heat, not dynasties. But under that ordinary ground, archaeologists found symbols of authority designed to be seen from a distance. Polished gold would have caught the harsh sunlight. Chest ornaments likely flashed when a leader moved. Animal imagery, bats, crocodiles, and other powerful creatures turned jewelry into a visual language of authority. This was status you could spot instantly. And the newest chamber matters because it is not standing alone. Mayo said the site has produced 9 similar chambers and that this was a place where elite individuals were laid to rest for about 200 years. This finding expands the interpretation of the site. One rich chamber is interesting. A ceremonial resting ground used by powerful people across multiple generations suggests something else entirely. It begins to resemble a long-running system. You can see that system even more clearly in another major El Caño find from 2024. Archaeologists uncovered the shared chamber of an important Kokle lord buried around 750 to 800 CE. Inside were gold ornaments, ceramic objects, bells, skirts, and a set of flutes. The team dubbed him the Lord of the Flutes, which sounds almost legendary until you remember this is not a myth. It's a real person from a real ceremonial tradition found in the same site. The scale grows even larger around that burial. Researchers found many other individuals placed in the same setting. Reports said the total could reach more than 30 people. At that point, you are no longer looking at one important person with a collection of objects. You are looking at an event, a choreographed display, a message to everyone watching that this leader stood at the center of a much bigger social order. This interpretation is supported by research. A 2020 study of El Caño's multiple chambers found the same basic pattern again and again. One highest status individual in each other, people arranged around that central figure, and a strong sense that the whole composition represented social order. The authors also concluded that some of these final ceremonies involved very harsh ritual practices. The layout itself was part of the performance of power. Now go back to the child-sized regalia, because that might be the strangest clue of all. One of Mayo's earlier breakthroughs came when she realized a set of tiny gold objects was too small for an adult. They appear to have belonged to a baby adorned like a chief. Later, the team found gold arm cuffs on the skeleton of a 12-year-old boy. Both finds point in the same direction. Status here may not have been something a person earned late in life. It may have started at birth. That implication is significant. If rank passed from father to son, then El Caño was not showing us a few isolated leaders. It was revealing a hereditary power system. That means established families, succession, and rules strong enough for an entire community to recognize them. Gold-working specialists had to exist, ceremonial knowledge had to be preserved, labor had to be organized. These were not loose little villages improvising everything as they went. This was structure. It also explains why El Caño feels bigger than a treasure story. Gold draws attention first. The real subject is political sophistication. The objects are only useful because of what they reveal: hierarchy, ceremony, inherited authority, and a leadership class that could stage power in a way everyone understood. Gold is what catches your eye first. The social system is what keeps the site interesting once the shine wears off. There is another reason El Caño matters so much. Less than 2 miles away sits Sitio Cante, the older Panamanian site that had long provided the main evidence for this gold-rich tradition. For years, Sitio Cante was the big reference point. Then El Caño started turning up its own chiefs, its own ornaments, its own ceremonial patterns. Suddenly, this was not one isolated hotspot. It was a broader cultural world, hiding in plain sight across the same landscape. Once you imagine that world, El Caño becomes incredibly visual. No giant stone monuments. Fine, the ceremony can still feel huge. Flutes playing, bells moving, gold breastplates flashing, beads sewn into clothing, animal symbols broadcasting lineage and rank. One early chief found at El Caño wore gold breastplates, arm cuffs, a bracelet of bells, a belt of hollow gold beads, and more than 2,000 tiny gold spheres arranged as if sewn onto a sash. That is not subtle fashion. That is ceremonial theater. Imagine one of these final ceremonies. A leader is placed at the center, gold catches the light. Music carries across the field. Companions are arranged with strict meaning. Everyone present can read the scene without a single written word. This person held the highest place. These families mattered. This order continues even now. The point was not private grief. The point was public memory and public hierarchy. That is why El Caño changes the history of Panama in a very specific way. It does not just add one more archaeological attraction to the map, it shows that central Panama had its own powerful chiefs, its own ceremonial specialists, its own symbols of rank, and probably its own dynastic lines. This region was not just absorbing importance from bigger neighbors, it was generating its own, and the site is still making that point clearer. El Caño has already revealed multiple elite chambers across years of excavation, and each new one expands the story. So the key discovery here is not a bracelet, or an earring, or even a chamber filled with gold. It is the realization that an ordinary Panamanian field was hiding a cemetery of rulers and clues to a forgotten power system that had been there the whole time, just waiting for someone to look deeper.
Not many civilizations are as mysterious as ancient Egypt, a powerful empire that lasted over 3,000 years. It gave us pyramids that still stand and myths that still inspire. It's one of the most explored places on Earth, yet somehow, we still find exciting stuff. In Abydos, archaeologists just uncovered a 3,600-year-old royal tomb. It's huge! It has golden hieroglyphs of deities covering the entrance, but the pharaoh's name? It's not there. It's missing. Who was this ruler, and what new chapter could this open in Egypt's story? If there's one place in Egypt where the line between life and demise feels thinner, it's Abydos. To the ancient Egyptians, this was sacred ground. They believed it was the burial place of Osiris, the god who literally passed away, had his remains separated, and came back to life to rule the underworld. Because of that, Abydos became Egypt's spiritual gathering place. Pharaohs built amazing temples here, like the Temple of Seti, famous for its King's List, a wall that has the names of 76 pharaohs carved in it. Pilgrims came from across Egypt, leaving offerings and participating in Osiris festivals, where his demise and rebirth were ritually reenacted. It wasn't just symbolic worship, it was Egypt's version of Comic-Con. But instead of cosplaying superheroes, people reenacted gods coming back to life. Obviously, pharaohs competed to be buried as close to Osiris as possible. Abydos became part cemetery, part holy city, part afterlife insurance policy. Fast forward thousands of years, and we still uncover remarkable stuff around Abydos. That's the case with the recently discovered tomb. In early 2025, a joint team of researchers from the US and Egypt decided to dig beneath a rocky rise ominously called Anubis Mountain. You remember Anubis, the jackal-headed deity who guarded cemeteries. The uncovered royal burial was hidden 23 feet below the surface. Sadly, even though it eluded archaeologists for so long, robbers had already taken away with treasures ages ago. They could definitely tell this was a tomb of someone super important. Similar to how you can walk around a mansion with no furniture but still deduce that someone rich must have lived there. The chamber had mud brick vaults rising over 16 feet. That's taller than a female giraffe standing upright. For something built 36 centuries ago, it still felt enormous. However, when you remember that Egyptians were masters of architecture, nothing seems surprising. So no treasures, no golden mask, and sadly, no name. The cartouche that should have spelled the king's identity was unreadable. Egyptian tombs usually bragged about who was inside. In ancient Egypt, a cartouche was basically a big oval name tag for kings wrapped in hieroglyphs. Think of them as VIP passes that worked in both this life and the next. Without it, your soul couldn't check into the afterlife hotel. That's because to the Egyptians, your name, your ren, wasn't just so your teacher could distinguish you from kids with the same haircut. It was a core part of who you were. As long as your ren survived, so did you. To have your name forgotten was considered a fate worse than passing away. A soul cannot journey without a name. That's why you'd see cartouches all over the place, on temples, obelisks, jewelry, statues, and tomb walls. It wasn't there just for the marketing. It kept the pharaoh's presence front and center everywhere you looked. Imagine building a massive tomb only for 3,600 years later to walk in and go, who is this guy again? Not cool at all. That's why it's fair to imagine our nameless pharaoh haunting the robbers for all eternity. So yeah, cartouche was considered very significant. One of the most famous and mind-blowing examples comes from the tomb of Thutmose III. His burial chamber and sarcophagus were literally shaped like a cartouche. In other words, the entire room was a living architectural symbol of his name. Thankfully, in the recently discovered tomb, not everything was erased. Painted in golden hues at the entrance were two familiar guardians, deities Isis and Nephthys. Isis was the magician who stitched Osiris back together and breathed life into him. Nephthys, her sister, was the eternal mourner and protector of the mummy. Together, they promised that whoever rested here would not face the afterlife alone, and it's one additional proof of the importance of the mysterious pharaoh. So, who could this be? To answer that, we need to go down history lane. This tomb dates back to Egypt's messy chapter called the Second Intermediate Period. Instead of one ruler in charge, the country had many rival kingdoms, each with its own little power base, like a real-life Egyptian version of Game of Thrones. And right in the middle of that chaos was Abydos. For a while, it was home to its own line of kings, the so-called Abydos dynasty. Those weren't the pyramid builders everyone knows, and that's why they're so mysterious. They left behind almost nothing. No great monuments, no sprawling cities, just fragments of names on broken blocks. For centuries, many scholars even doubted they existed at all. That sorta changed in 2014, when archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Senebkay, one of those shadowy kings. Now, everything we know about Senebkay points to him having quite a story to tell. His bones revealed 18 deep wounds, the kind you get in battle. He had blows to his skull, back, and hands, and likely lost his life fighting, making him one of the few pharaohs we know who sadly fell in combat. His tomb was modest, with reused artifacts from earlier kings, but it delivered one priceless thing: proof. Until Senebkay, the Abydos dynasty was just a theory. With him, it became real. And that's why the new discovery could be a big deal. The newly uncovered royal tomb at Abydos shares the same layout and style as Senebkay's. It has limestone chambers, mud brick vaults, and protective deities, although it's much bigger. Which again raises the possibility that we're looking at an even earlier, more powerful ruler of Abydos. Whoever he was, he wanted to be remembered alongside the greats. Which is ironic, because it seems that history tried erasing him. Perhaps additional findings alongside his tomb could tell us more. Yes, there's more, and it's actually pretty cool. Not far from Abydos, in the village of Banawit, archaeologists uncovered a Roman-era pottery workshop. Yeah, you heard that right, a pottery factory close to a pharaoh's burial ground. The site had huge clay kilns, storage rooms, and even broken shards called ostraca. They were basically ancient sticky notes. Except instead of shopping lists, those had receipts scratched onto them in Greek and Demotic Egyptian. Little records of everyday transactions, the kind of thing you'd never expect to find near a lost dynasty king. Honestly, the potters missed a chance. Forget boring receipts, they should have been selling Osiris's mugs and Anubis figurines to pilgrims and tourists. But that's not all. It seems that centuries later, during the medieval period, the same ground became a cemetery. Archaeologists found mud brick graves with skeletal remains. This could mean that Abydos kept its aura of significance for hundreds of years after the Age of Pharaohs. So why this hill again and again? Is this place really a getaway to the afterlife? It is, after all, the very place where Osiris is said to rest. That belief lingered like a shadow for thousands of years, strong enough to pull in pharaohs and later medieval families. Different rituals, same sacred ground. Although, to be fair, the Romans weren't here for Osiris. They came to make pots. The story of Abydos is not over. The excavations will continue, and who knows what else could be discovered in the future. Today, archaeologists are armed with tools that are basically X-ray glasses for the desert. Every scan could reveal a hidden chamber, or if we're lucky, finally give our nameless pharaoh his wren back to him. In fact, I became strangely invested in finding out who he was. So let's hope for some news soon. It's only a matter of time. Do you have your own theories? Let me know.
Unlike many other ancient Egyptian burial grounds, King Tutankhamun's tomb stayed hidden and free of unwanted thieves for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. This area was already being extensively explored by the time they stumbled upon Tut's spot. The entrance was all covered in debris from building a nearby tomb, which must have also helped keep it a secret. There were also zero writings or signs on the outside of the tomb. Time passing also played a part in keeping it in amazing shape until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally made it in. But was Carter that big of a hero? Some recent findings say he might have been sneakier than initially thought. People used to think Carter wasn't just a glorified treasure hunter, he was a true archaeologist. Before Tut, he had been on a relentless quest for Egyptian artifacts. He discovered his interest in these unusual objects when he was a child, and soon started drawing the sculptures and inscriptions that were found in ancient tombs. After stumbling upon the remains of King Tut, Carter spent a decade recording and processing all sorts of objects, like golden thrones, chariots, and statues from Tut's tomb, shipping them down the Nile to Egypt's museum in Cairo. Well, at least that was the official story. More recent discoveries claim that not all of the objects made it to Egyptian officials. A secret letter seems to uncover Carter's little 10 for them, 1 for me policy. The letter in question was sent to Sir Alan Gardner, a philologist and friend of Carter's, dated from 1922. In these writings, Carter mentioned having found the tomb and was asking his buddy for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardner seems to be thanking Carter for an amulet, which was sent to him as a thank you gift. Carter was adamant that it didn't come from Tut's tomb, but evidently it did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was onto Carter's sneaky endeavors, but couldn't prove it. He compared Gardner's amulet to others from Tut's tomb, and lo and behold, they were a perfect match. Gardner was so disappointed to have been put in such a sticky situation that he vented to Carter in another letter. Deciding to be a good friend, Gardner didn't throw the famous archaeologist under the bus. Instead, he advised Carter to take those stolen goods back to Cairo, just like he'd advise you to like this video and subscribe to the Brightside channel for more amazing videos on the most unique topics in history. It's not the only shady piece of information on Carter's post-discovery behavior. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who used to work with a controversial archaeologist, gave some information in an obscure journal in Cairo. He claimed that Carter sneakily cracked open the burial chamber door himself. Then he sealed it back up like nothing had happened before the official uncovering. Now, why would he do that? Well, the same theory suggests that Carter and his crew might have entered the tomb early so they could get their hands on some ancient goodies. Obviously, these people couldn't risk having such objects sold while they were still alive, but made sure they were auctioned off after they passed. Carter, though, never confessed to anything. He made no official denial either, but the Egyptian government couldn't risk any more mysterious disappearances, so they prohibited him from entering the tomb for a while. Some have connected this apparent stealing to the curse of King Tut. If you've never heard of it, know that it became quite the scary tale soon after King Tutankhamun's resting place was uncovered. It claimed that anyone messing with the tomb of the boy pharaoh would face some serious bad luck. It's not all dramatic like a mummy going on an aggressive spree, but word got out that the people involved in disturbing King Tut's lair met some mysterious, untimely ends. The main untimely passing related to this supposed curse is that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was this British aristocrat who helped fund the search for the tomb. He passed away just a year after the tomb was opened. Now, people love to call it mysterious, but it turns out that Herbert was already in pretty bad shape health-wise when he got to Cairo, and he ended up getting taken down by a regular disease. Now, let's talk numbers. There were a lot of people linked to this tomb opening: security guards, archaeologists, and supporting staff. And sure, a few of them did pass not long after the tomb started receiving visitors. As much as we'd like this curse to be true for the sake of, good storytelling, statistically, if you have a bunch of people connected to opening a tomb, you'd expect some passings just by random chance. The average lifespan for those supposedly targeted by the ancient curse was more than 20 years after the spell was supposed to kick in. Herbert's daughter even lived until the 1980s, that's half a century later. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, a solid 16 years after the big reveal. Some have suggested that the whole curse was nothing more than a careful PR strategy. You see, when Tut's tomb was found, Howard Carter wanted to make a priority out of keeping nosy reporters away, so he might have come up with a curse hanging over anyone entering the boy king's resting place. But what was stolen from King Tut's tomb anyway? Well, some jewelry to begin with. It might have been snatched by Howard Carter himself, according to a French specialist. He did some intensive research by looking at old pictures taken from inside the tomb back in the 1920s. He compared those images to various objects from museums and auction houses. He soon started to piece together the whereabouts of some of Tut's jewelry. First up, there's this collar that used to be on Tut's chest. It was all broken into pieces, and some parts went via Carter to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri. Meanwhile, other bits ended up on a necklace owned by some unnamed people who tried to sell it in 2015 but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum agrees, as they've confirmed the information on their website. Then there's a headdress piece. Some beads from it that once belonged to Tut apparently got stolen by Carter too. They were also strung into a necklace and are now being held at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made out of glazed ceramic magic spent some time at the Met, far away in New York. Thankfully, it was sent back to Egypt a bit over a decade ago. This seems to have been, as you'd expect by now, also stolen by Carter. Missing artifacts aside, King Tut still gave a ton of amazing objects that helped us learn more about this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous burial mask. It's this massive 21-inch gold art piece with semi-precious stones and glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and showcases the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress with a cobra and vulture. On the back, there's this spell from an important ancient Egyptian spiritual book that's supposed to make sure it works just as well in the afterlife. Tut was also apparently a board game enthusiast. They found 4 board games in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists also found a pair of gold sandals, though you'd imagine they were more for show than for comfort. In fact, the pharaoh probably never wore them in his lifetime. Now, speaking of fashion items, it turns out Tut was quite the fancy ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was used to pick out, adjust, and store his outfits and jewelry. The boy king seemed to have also enjoyed some music, based on the 2 trumpets historians found in his tomb. Though they were played back in 1935 in a BBC broadcast, the instruments are today considered too fragile to be maneuvered. Consider the Great Pyramids, one of the original 7 wonders of the world and the only one that still exists today. Did you know that the pyramids of Giza weren't the only pyramids out there? And they weren't even the first ones. First, there were the pretty good pyramids, but they didn't catch on. Nah, I made that up. Back to the story. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that kings were chosen by gods to serve on earth as their mediators. In the afterlife, they were expected to become gods themselves. The pyramid complex was built to make sure that the king had everything they might need in the afterlife. The complex included the pyramid, a palace, and temples. The tomb in the pyramid, where the king was buried, was filled with many things they might need, like furniture, food, and gold vessels. Actually, the first pyramid had been built 80 years before the first pyramid of Giza appeared. Overall, there were around 100 of them. Some weren't finished though, since the construction took a while and not every pharaoh lived long enough to see the end of the construction. And now let's talk about the construction itself. The biggest of the pyramids of Giza is as tall as a 40-story building. So how on earth did they manage to build a structure that massive 5,000 years ago, long before machines and other equipment appeared? Well, let's figure it out. So Pharaoh Khufu ascended the throne around 2575 BCE, and his architects started the construction of the oldest and biggest of the pyramids of Giza. He figured that over 2 million limestone blocks had to be used to build the pyramid, each weighing around 2.5 tons, around the weight of a rhino. The architect wanted to finish the construction in 20 years. To make it possible, a stone had to be carried and pushed into place every 4 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, except leap year. So obviously, a lot of workers were needed to make it happen. Many believe that it was enslaved people who worked at the pyramid's construction site, but that's not true. Workers came from all over Egypt to contribute to the project. All in all, around 25,000 of them. The Egyptians were doing all kinds of work, starting with manual labor and crafting tools to administrative work. They all worked around 10 hours a day. They were housed and well fed, and they were overall living a more comfortable life than an average Egyptian could afford at that time. Supposedly, the builders lived in a nearby temporary city and were a highly organized community with a strong leader. The pyramids seem to be designed to align with the points on a compass, and their sides symbolized the rays of the sun. But back at that time, there were no compasses. Ancient Egyptians figured out the directions themselves and with amazing precision. To align the pyramids, they used two constellations. The construction site was arranged on the west bank of the Nile River. This also had a symbolic meaning. Just like the sun sets in the west, life sets in the west as well. The second pyramid of Giza was for Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre. It's a bit smaller, but this one has the famous noseless statue of the Sphinx. Of course, originally it had a nose. I would tell you what happened to it, but it's still a mystery, and no one knows for sure. Sphinxes have the body of a lion and the head of a human. They were considered guardians of important areas. This famous Sphinx, also pronounced Sphinx, has the head of Pharaoh Khafre and is guarding his pyramid, facing the sunrise. The Sphinx is one of the biggest and oldest statues in the world. Originally, it not only had a nose, but was also painted. Scientists have discovered traces of the red color of its face. So, most likely, the Sphinx was painted red. There are also remains of yellow and blue color on its body. The statue definitely wasn't boring. Till around 1800, the Sphinx was buried up to its shoulders until an adventurer with a team of 160 men dug it out. But let's get back to the construction. The workers, of course, needed stone blocks. There were two main places where people could get these stones. One source was close to the construction site, but that fossil-lined yellow stone was only suitable for the pyramid's interior. The limestone blocks for the exterior were hauled from 8 miles away on 30-foot-long sleds. Apparently, it wasn't too hard to pull them. The sand mixed with the right amount of water was pretty slick, and 10 people could move a sled even with a rock weighing so much. Surprisingly, cutting off a block of limestone wasn't the biggest problem. When in the ground, it was soft and could be split relatively easy. But after getting exposed to the air, limestone hardens. So the most difficult part was to shape the blocks. That step was crucial because the smallest inaccuracies could lead to the whole pyramid collapsing. So, okay, those limestones were mined, carried on a sled, shaped, and then what? How could they be put into place? Well, this is still a mystery. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of a ramp system that dates back around the time the pyramids were being built. So historians have come to the consensus that, most likely, the Egyptians designed a unique ramp system to move and pull huge stone blocks. The most common opinion is that there were several ramps around the pyramid. There probably was a central ramp with 2 staircases on each side of it built over the pyramid stones. The ramp was growing as the pyramid was getting higher. People might have been walking up the stairs, pulling up stones on wooden sleds. But this is just one of the options. Other experts say that the ramps were around the pyramid, and some say that the ramps were inside the pyramid. Maybe we will never know for sure, and it'll forever remain a mystery. The exterior limestone of the pyramid was polished with sand and stone until it gleamed. On top, there was a gold and silver capstone, which glimmered over Egypt like a second sun. So, that's how it was 5,000 years ago. Now, about the interior. Surprisingly, there's not much inside the pyramid. Most of it is just solid stone with very little open space. But let's take a quick look inside. From the entrance, there are 2 stairways, one going down and the other going up. They take us to the chambers. There are 3 of them inside. Now, why is that? Apparently, throughout the whole construction, a burial chamber had to be prepared at all times, just in case a pharaoh kicked the bucket before the construction ended. So, separate chambers were built one after another as the construction progressed. The last of them was the main one. It's called the King's Chamber. It's the one where Khufu was resting. It's the biggest room at the very heart of the pyramid, and there's a big passageway leading to it. It was likely used as a kind of elevator to move granite up to build the interior. Granite was also used to make 5 stories of support beams to ensure that the pyramid didn't collapse. And we can see that it worked since it's been standing for centuries. Unfortunately, none of these chambers have hieroglyphs on the walls. If you want to see the writings, you should go to the decorated tombs near the pyramids. Those pieces of art are depiction of ancient Egypt's culture and daily life. The texts allow researchers to study their language and grammar. The treasures that once were in the pyramids have been taken by people. There are also many secret tunnels and passages inside the pyramids, but even today, no one knows the whole plan of the interior. Scientists have been sending little robots with cameras inside for many years, but there's still a lot we don't know about the pyramids. Now they're trying to use an X-ray to scan the pyramids from the outside, without going inside. So yeah, ancient Egyptians did create a mystery no one has been able to crack for 5,000 years already.